An empty ship in the middle of the Atlantic. Everything is in its place. Food on the table, barrels of alcohol are sealed, navigational instruments are in order, not a soul on board. This discovery was made by the British. Ship Dei Grazia, when on December 4, 1872, it found the drifting brig Mary Celeste 1,000 kilometers from Gibraltar. The ship was in good condition, no signs of a struggle, no signs of panic. In the hold, 1,700 barrels of alcohol, almost all untouched. The boat was missing. The only thing that caused alarm was the disappearance of the captain, his family, and the entire crew. There was no one on board, and no traces to explain it either. A diary was found on the ship, in which the last entry was dated November 25th, just 9 days before the discovery. It was absolutely ordinary: course, speed, weather. Not a word about alarm or problems. All navigation was in perfect order. The compass was a little out of order, but it was not critical. Maps, magazines, food, water, everything was there. People seemed to have evaporated. One of the first versions was a pirate attack. But why then was the hold with valuable cargo left untouched? Why was the money, personal belongings, and jewelry of the crew left in place? Pirates do not take people and leave alcohol. This version was soon discarded. There was a version about a mutiny. They say the crew got drunk from alcohol fumes, killed the captain, and ran away. But there was no reason for this. Captain Briggs was experienced, his family was on board, and even the tracks on the deck showed no signs of a struggle. In addition, the alcohol being transported was technical, undrinkable. And why in that case take a lifeboat with you and disappear in the middle of the ocean? The next version is a storm or a tsunami. But the sea was calm at that time. No ship in the area reported bad weather conditions. There was no damage to the ship. No holes, no signs of a natural disaster. The bilge pumps were working. The barometer in the cabin showed normal pressure. Everything indicated that the Mary Celeste was moving calmly and steadily. One of the most intriguing versions is poisoning or toxic fumes from the cargo. The methanol barrels could have leaked. The fumes could have caused panic. People could have thought that an explosion would occur and hastily abandoned the ship in a lifeboat. But why didn't they return? The sea was calm. The lifeboat could easily catch up with the ship. Did something or someone prevent them from returning? And then an even darker version appears, that the crew became victims of an unknown force or phenomenon that defies explanation. Too many things in this story do not add up. The cleanliness of the ship, the absence of signs of violence, the complete disappearance of people without a fight. It seems that they simply disappeared, vanished. Some of the evidence on board was alarming. The clock had stopped, the sextant was gone, the ship's chronometer was missing. Perhaps someone was trying to throw off the investigation. Or perhaps the captain deliberately took the navigational instruments, thinking he would return. But both the boat and the people were gone forever. Not a single crew member was ever found. Even after a century and a half, this story remains a mystery. Everything suggests that the crew abandoned the ship voluntarily, in a complete hurry, but there are no signs of external pressure or threat. This is one of those rare maritime incidents where there is not even a thread left to pull. And that is what makes the case of the Mary Celeste so eerie. The most plausible explanation for the disappearance of the crew of the Mary Celeste must take into account several factors at once: an empty but undamaged ship, missing documents, untouched cargo, personal belongings in place, and a lifeboat that has disappeared. All this rules out a storm, a shipwreck, or a sudden pirate attack. So what could have made an experienced captain and the entire crew voluntarily abandon ship in the open ocean? One of the most popular hypotheses is an alcohol leak from an overload of barrels. There were 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol in the hold, 9 of which were empty. Theoretically, alcohol vapors could have penetrated into the living quarters and created an explosion hazard. This could have scared Captain Briggs so much that he ordered a temporary abandonment of the ship, but on a lifeboat tied to the ship. However, if this were the case, he would not have left all the navigational instruments and personal belongings. In addition, no signs of fire or damage were found. The theory is interesting, but incomplete and poorly supported. A more logical combination of scenarios is that there was a minor incident on board, such as a short circuit or a sudden gas leak that alerted the crew. Fearing an explosion, the crew could have quickly abandoned the ship, but were unable to return due to weather conditions, such as strong winds or waves. This would explain why the ship was in disarray, but there were no signs of violence. The behavior of Captain Benjamin Briggs deserves special attention. He was an extremely level-headed man, known for his calm and Christian strictness. He would not have abandoned the ship without a serious reason. So there was a reason, and perhaps he hoped that it was temporary. As for the versions involving third parties, pirates, mutineers, or insurance fraudsters, they are almost completely ruled out. Nothing valuable was missing on board, the cargo was safe, and the insurance payout was within the norm. The myth of a curse or supernatural intervention is just an attempt to explain the inexplicable, born from a desire to romanticize the tragedy. However, there is one point that is truly alarming: the disappearance of all the ship's documentation. The logbook was found, but the entries in it stopped 10 days before the ship was discovered. The ship's chronometer, sextant, and captain's chronometer were gone. These items, like the navigation charts, would hardly have been left on the ship if the crew had abandoned it voluntarily. This means that the crew really did intend to return. My final version is that Captain Briggs noticed alarming signs of an alcohol leak, perhaps smelled gas, or even a weak explosion. Fearing a detonation, he ordered the launch of the lifeboat, having first taken the navigation instruments and documents. The lifeboat remained tied to the ship. However, while the crew was in it, a storm or a strong wave could have broken the halyard. The ship left, the crew remained, and perished in the ocean. This is a simple, terrible, and absolutely real explanation. Nevertheless, the mystery of the situation, the many small inconsistencies, the disappearance of the personal diaries of the captain and his wife, as well as the strangely drawn-out silence of the ship owners at first, all this leaves the feeling that we still do not know something. Perhaps the truth about the Mary Celeste is somewhere in the gap between logic and the inexplicable.